Member for Abitibi-Temiscamingue. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think what's important today to understand the motion is to understand how the Summer Canada Jobs Program actually works, especially from the perspective of MPs and how we're involved. This is a program that helps young people to give them job opportunities. And the purpose of this program is not to replace a worker who would have been doing that work anyway. It's very clear that when you apply for this program, it really is for a specific project that wouldn't have taken place if you didn't have the financing for it. So you can't employ a young person to do the job, for example, of a municipal employee who would have done that job anyway. You need to prove that this job will not exist if the funding is not provided. So the idea is not to replace any workers and to give their jobs to students. I think that's a pretty important point to make. This truly is a program that deals with special projects. Now, how are MPs involved? Well, they set priorities in their riding. For example, in my riding, I look for projects that are agricultural, that are involved with agri-food, or, for example, that assist people who are experiencing difficult circumstances and require services, or, for example, that is involved in tourism. So I've chosen priorities for my riding, and over time I assess those priorities, and over time I may add projects that encourage physical activity, for example. And these priorities are set by the Member of Parliament. Suggestions can be made to the MP. If, for example, the MP doesn't necessarily know what the priorities should be. So there may be employment and social skills development that may make suggestions for priorities or projects that have taken place in these ridings. So that's where the MPs are involved in the beginning. And then these projects are assessed, and they're assessed based on the priorities that have been set. They may be given points, for example, extra points, if they reflect the priorities of that riding. So that's the first way we're involved. Now, public servants then do a detailed analysis of all the projects. They use a grid that allows them to apply points to each, assign points to each project. And once they've been ranked, the MPs receive a list of projects that are recommended and a list of those projects that are not recommended and that funding wouldn't necessarily be granted for. The MP then has to review that list along with the people involved with Canada Summer Jobs. They can ask all kinds of questions. For example, they may be asked about, the MPs rather may be asked about what the projects involve. And so that may be an opportunity to provide extra information about the projects so that there's a good understanding of how the funds are going to be used. And if there's any disagreement, well, changes can be made. For example, more hours, hours can be increased, or projects may not be funded. And it will be clearly indicated that certain things have been changed at the request of the MP. But the person proposing the project will be aware of why these are turned down. Now, if a project does not respect, for example, the rights and freedoms in the charter, the MP already has the possibility to ask questions. They may ask questions about the project, who is organizing it, who is sponsoring it, and I think that's important, especially when you receive a long list of projects and the business is only identified through a number. And when I look at the list, I always ask for more information. I ask more questions because a business with a number doesn't really tell me exactly what they do. So MPs, without the Liberal changes, already have that possibility to intervene and to make sure that these are good projects that will give young people the opportunity to develop their skills. And if MPs feel that changes are necessary, they can intervene. So I think it's very important to understand that. We now have a situation where some members have shown some lack of judgment by supporting organizations whose mandate does contravene the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And because of that mistaken judgment, that poor judgment, it was decided that a solution needed to be found that would apply across the board. It wasn't necessarily done in the best way possible. It did frighten a lot of people, and I think there was a lack of understanding about what the purpose was. And that's too bad, because now we're in the situation we're in. This is a very good program. It does a lot of good in my riding, and it provides a fair bit of flexibility. And it's unfortunate now that organizations have been scared off, because there may be religious organizations. There are religious organizations, actually, that do a lot of good work, that do work out in the field. I myself, in my riding, have various religious organizations, and there is one that has brought forward projects to, for example, visit the museum. There is a museum in the church, and the museum displays all kinds of artifacts and that explain to people the past of the church. And there are many people who do very good work. It's work that has value for tourists as well. So this work is related, yes, to a religion, but it has a historic aspect to it. And this organization probably, because of the misinformation that has been spread, has perhaps misinterpreted what the requirements are. I think it's important to understand that when people show poor judgment, it's important to decide how you go about changes to a program that already was working well. And there might have been a better way to do it.
Another thing that's important to understand about the Canada Summer Jobs Program is that it's very task-based. It's not organization-based. So, in other words, people can't give points for something that isn't on the form. What is being evaluated is the task and not the organization. So, if a tourist organization, for example, asks for someone to mow the lawn on the property, well, they wouldn't get a lot of points, because the work isn't directly related to tourism. The work is just maintenance work, and maintenance work doesn't allow people to gain any particular skill set. So the goal is to find projects where young people will really be able to develop particular skills. So, for example, you might choose projects that are aligned with priorities and that will really allow people to learn. For example, if you take tourism, which is a priority in my riding, you might have a project to create an exhibition about the women who changed the history of Abitibi-Temiscamingue. And that would be something that is directly related to tourism. And there are skills in terms of management, research, publicity, mounting an exhibition. So there is a real link with these skills. So it's extremely important to understand that this program is based on the tasks that are carried out, on the work that is carried out. And that's why it's important to know what type of organization you're dealing with. Now, this gives me the opportunity to talk about another issue that was created when the Conservatives were in power, because there were significant job cuts in certain regions. And before, the applications for the Summer Jobs Program were studied in my riding. There were people working for Service Canada there, and those jobs were cut because it was decided that the analysis of those applications would be sent to Laval. So now, people in Laval look at the projects and analyze them, and they make the final decision. So the people in Laval decide which projects are good for Abitibi-Temiscamingue. And that is also a big problem, because when there are organizations that may not be as reputable, well, then when there's somebody who's on the ground who understands the region, they would be able to help, but they can't, the way that things are currently set up. So I look forward to answering questions from my colleagues, because I see that I don't have any more time left, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Questions et commentaires? On l'a